Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ed Juregin. I'm the founding director of the Baker Institute here at Rice University, and I want to warmly welcome you to our institute and to the university. The idea for this conference we're holding today came from asking the question, what's next in how we use computing to communicate, learn, work, and entertain ourselves? We read in the newspapers, Verizon and AT&T win big in auction of spectrum. This was in last week's New York Times. And know that those companies have spent billions of dollars on radio spectrum to bring more choices in devices and services to consumers. AT&T's Jim Ciccone is here to speak today, and I look forward, as I know you do, to his views on this and other topics. Over the weekend, the New York Times again hit the beat covered by this conference with, quote, hopes for wireless cities fade as internet providers pull out, unquote. We wonder if it is economically possible and politically viable for American cities to catch up with places like Athens, Leipzig, Vienna, where free or inexpensive Wi-Fi already exists in many areas. We wonder, are all Americans entitled to universal internet service in their homes? Just yesterday in the Houston Chronicle, we have this headline, Mayor Bill White plans 10 bubbles of free Wi-Fi. Mayor targets low-income areas and eyes citywide coverage in the future. So the topic of our conference could not be really more timely. We think about Houston competing as a global city. It is indeed, in my mind, a global city and a very multi-ethnic city. In many ways, Houston is a microcosm of what America is becoming in its demographic, ethnic, racial mix, and also its economic base, and as a port. We compare ourselves not just with Chicago, Philadelphia, or San Francisco, but also Singapore, Seoul, and Dubai. Is greater investment in our information technology infrastructure a prudent investment? Will it help us compete in the global marketplace? And equally important, if so, how do we do it, and how should we do it? There are important public policy issues here, and that is why we are addressing these issues today in this conference on convergence and connectivity. We have gathered together business leaders, educators, government officials, and even an electrical engineer to entertain the question, what's next for our information society? Where do we go from here? Well, we want to be pragmatic. This is not just highfalutin policy. 3 panels sketch out the issues we're asking about. One brings together chief information officers, the CIOs of some of Houston's major players in logistics, healthcare, energy, and education. Another pulls together a former regulator, a state legislator, and a city councilwoman, while the third has 3 experts on the issue of digital inclusion. We also include a number of other speakers, Julie Hedlund from the Information Technology Innovation Foundation, who will be wrapping up today with her assessment of the big picture. The director of Houston's library, Rhea Lawson, will tell us how her institution aims to use information technology to meet a set of challenges our research staff has described as an approaching crisis in the public education system. We have an anthropologist from the University of Houston, Jerome Crowder, who will give us his take on how technology is used in economically disadvantaged households here in Houston. Finally, we're always pleased to showcase our Rice talent. We have Joel Thurstein, our Associate Provost for Innovative Scholarly Communication, here to talk about connections. Also, Professor Ed Knightley from our Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering will tell us about his wireless laboratory, which is not on campus, but instead stretches across the East End neighborhood of Pecan Park. Kamran Khan, the Rice University Vice Provost for IT, will chair our first session this morning with the CIOs. Before I introduce our opening speaker, I would like to acknowledge those who have made this event possible. I'd like to extend thanks for the important contributions of AT&T and Microsoft, as well as Rice's Fondren Library and the Ken Kennedy Institute for Information Technology for making this event a reality. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, Mr. James Ciccone, Senior Executive Vice President, External and Legislative Affairs at AT&T Incorporated. AT&T's top public policy official and chair of the AT&T Foundation, and Jim Ciccone was a fellow public servant in the administration of George Herbert Walker Bush, who we were just talking about some old war stories before we came in here. He served as an assistant to James A. Baker III, the honorary chair of this institute, who was then White House Chief of Staff, and was one of his key inside players. He also worked as a special assistant in President Reagan's White House. Jim has served as General Counsel and Executive Vice President for Law and Government Affairs at AT&T Corp. Prior to joining AT&T in September 1998, he was a partner at Aiken Gump Strauss Howard & Feld, LLP. You can see in your program that Jim Ciccone currently serves on a number of boards and policy institutes and has had a very distinguished public career. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome me in inviting Jim Ciccone to the podium. Jim.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Chris Brock, for putting this conference together. Really appreciate all of you coming. It's a wonderful privilege to be here at the Baker Center. As Ed mentioned, I had the pleasure of working with Jim Baker in both the Reagan and the Bush White Houses when he was Secretary of State, so I feel a real special connection here with this institution named in his honor. And you know, I've been around a while. Some people might say too long, but I don't think in that time I've ever met a finer public servant than Jim Baker. So it's wonderful that you all have honored him by building this institution here. And Tom Wolfe notwithstanding, you know, you can go home again. I sort of feel that way when I'm in Houston. My parents are right up the road. I grew up in East Texas, not far from here, and went to another Texas university. But being in a room full of people that are as committed and compelled by public policy as I am is like being home. And of course, public policy is a first cousin to politics. You all know the late, great Molly Ivins once described Texas politics as the finest form of free entertainment ever invented. And but as fascinating as and she was able to say that, by the way, in a state that was actually sitting next door to Louisiana, which is which kind of gives you a window of what entertainment is really like. In fact, the famous line that I still remember from Louisiana, the late Governor Earl K. Long there one time was kind of famous for these quips, and they asked him how he wanted to be remembered when he died, and he said, "When I die, if I die, I want to be buried in South Louisiana so I can continue to participate in electoral politics." So Molly had a window on a range of views of politics, but as fascinating as politics in this part of the country can be, nothing is more exciting or more essential to the future of America than the topic that brings us together here this morning. Under the broad umbrella of convergence and connectivity, this conference is going to take a wide-angle look at what sometimes is called the broadband revolution, where it stands now, where it's going, what it means for public policy. You're going to share ideas with an impressive set of experts. I'm really impressed with the list of speakers that you put together. And I sort of wish I could sit here and listen to all of this, and then in the finest Washington traditions, go back home and pretend these were all my ideas. But since the Baker Institute has asked me to handle the opening kickoff, I'd like to look at the opportunities and the challenges that come with broadband connectivity from a company whose mission statement is really to connect people anytime, any place they are, and do it better than anybody else. I really believe that history will remember the close of the 20th century and the opening of the 21st century as a time of great strides in connectivity. The examples are everywhere. In the U.S., we've passed the 50% mark in households with broadband internet connections, and in fact, we passed the 85% mark in terms of households with a connection available. And look at how cellular phones are connecting people around the world with a little help from that broadband technology. There are now 3.3 billion active cell phones in the world. That's out of the total population of 6.3 billion people in the world. So 3.3 billion cell phones. This has all happened in 26 years. According to the Washington Post last month, that's the fastest diffusion of any technology in human history, faster even than polio vaccine, which, as you know, was deployed rapidly around the world, and that scourge. AT&T, as you know, has been in the connectivity business quite a long time. We started life as American Telephone and Telegraph Company in the late 19th century. The modern concept of connectivity goes back to the invention of the telegraph in 1844. And even then, there were some skeptics about this, the value of connecting people. One of those skeptics was none other than Henry David Thoreau. And as telegraph lines began to spread across the country in 1845, Thoreau essentially told the techies of his day to get a grip. He said, and I quote, "You know, we're in a great haste to construct a magnetic telegraph line from Maine to Texas. But Maine and Texas, it may be, have nothing important to communicate." Now today, of course, Thoreau might be talking about the internet. While the importance of everything being communicated on the net is questionable, there's no question that communication of some form is taking place. People are connecting on a scale that would have been unimaginable less than 5 years ago. In the time it took me to say good morning, 2 million email messages were launched worldwide. That's right, we're sending emails at the rate of 2 million per second. While those 2 million messages were being launched, somebody somewhere was starting a new blog. You remember 5 years ago when bloggers were some sort of rare and select breed. Today there's a new blog started every 2 seconds. But for all the familiarity of the internet today, it's also a breeding ground for misconceptions. And some of them are funny and harmless. There's the New Yorker cartoon that showed a young woman sitting at a tiny table in a cocktail lounge, and sitting on the other side of her was a little boy of about 8 years old. And the young woman saying to the little boy, "Loved your email, but somehow I thought you'd be older." This is the perils of internet dating. Huh? But there's a more serious misconception about the internet itself and the nature of it than the cartoons describe. I call it the Big Rock Candy Mountain view of the internet. Folks with this view see the internet as some sort of magical place up in the clouds where information in all forms is endless and free. And many of the population really tend to view the internet as some magical place. We've done focus groups on it, and these are the sort of things that come back. They love it. They value it. It's become an essential part of their lives, but they view it as somehow this magic good that just materialized. But there's nothing magical or ethereal about the internet, no more than there is about the interstate highway system. You take a look at this here, and I'm not sure with the lighting you can see it very clearly. But this is a schematic of the internet. It was prepared by AT&T Labs. It actually shows the primary nodes on the internet. The various colors are coded down here to the various network providers. And actually the only thing that really isn't depicted accurately is the number of nodes. If we actually put all of them up there, it'd just be one big color blob, and you wouldn't be able to actually see the connections there. And I apologize that you can't see it as clearly as it comes out on the posters. But it gives you a sense that it really is a network of networks, that there's so many different providers that are involved with the internet. There's no one dominant force, and it's all of these different networks, all of them privately funded, that have been connected together through the artistry of the people that originally conceived it. And these interconnected networks are not a highway that takes us to a place called the internet. They are the internet, as you can see. Yet you'd be amazed at how many people don't fully understand that. So it is a modern miracle, no doubt, but it's not one created by an act of God or an act of Congress. It's a miracle created, maintained, and constantly being expanded by private investment. Keeping that investment flowing and growing has to be a priority for public policy concerning the internet in America. I don't have to tell you how critical this is to the economic future of this country and our global competitiveness. Internet service providers are investing about $72 billion a year in their own facilities right now. AT&T alone is spending about a quarter of that sum annually. Now, most of that is for bigger, smarter broadband networks. For reasons I'll get into in a minute, this isn't going to be enough going forward. Now, AT&T is a leading investor in Internet technology. As I mentioned, we've invested billions to build, maintain, and expand this state-of-the-art network based on an Internet protocol technology better known as IP. Just a few weeks ago, we announced plans to invest an additional $1 billion simply in expanding our global Internet commitment using undersea cables and things of this nature. We're also completing right now, this June, in fact, we'll complete it, deployment of OC 768 routers. Now, what does this mean if you're not a network engineer? Well, it means we've quadrupled the speed of our backbone by June, from 10 gigabytes a second to 40 gigabytes a second, okay? Which is an extraordinary leap if you think about it. And our backbone is the biggest in America. Not the only one by far, but it's the biggest. So today, we provide direct Internet connections through DSL to 14 million American households. They depend on AT&T for their broadband Internet service, but many more are reaching the Internet through their cell phones, their BlackBerries, mobile technology, and we're leading the country in that. You know, we do have a challenge just with our image, I'd confess, because people tend to still associate AT&T with that old phone company that I mentioned from the 19th century. But phone service itself is changing very dramatically, and we're in the process of changing it with that investment. We're running fiber optic lines direct into residential neighborhoods to give consumers an affordable crack at advanced online services with everything they provide, everything you can do through IP. Right now, we're using Internet protocol through those lines to create a new form of pay TV called IPTV. It's, at first glance, it sort of looks a little bit like cable, but it's not. Because it's based on IP, it's got an incredible array of capabilities that go well beyond your traditional channel selection through a cable system. And we're using that to slug it out competitively now with cable TV companies for a slice of the market that they used to dominate. In turn, the cable companies are using Internet protocol technology to slug it out with us in voice technology, which we used to dominate. So this technology is enabling competition, competitive choices. It's bringing new services and lower prices to millions of Americans daily as it's being deployed. AT&T today, as I mentioned before, is also the nation's leading wireless provider. We've got 70 million wireless customers in the country. We're the biggest Wi-Fi provider. But for purposes of this conference, AT&T's most relevant Internet credential is our Internet backbone network and its smaller tributary networks. And you can see on that thing, if I could point us out to you, we're sort of over in this little area here, you know, the kind of the bluish purplish look. Like the backbone networks of our competitors, our network carries content of all kinds from all sources. You know, so far so good, but a major challenge is looming. All of these networks are in the early stages of handling what Brett Swanson of the Progress and Freedom Foundation has named the exaflood. I'm sure many of you have already heard the term. You're going to hear it a lot more in the future. The exaflood is shorthand for an unprecedented new wave of broadband Internet traffic. It's estimated by 2015, Internet traffic will be 50 times greater than it was in 2006. So we're looking at a traffic load of 1,000 exabytes. Now think about that, 50 times greater, okay? We will finish in June one of the biggest deployments in the history of the Internet. And we're simply increasing the size of our capacity by 4 times. By 2015, Internet traffic is going to increase 50 times. That's the challenge we're facing. I confess that a few years ago I couldn't have told you the difference between an exabyte and a mosquito bite, but you do learn things as you're around this industry. But I should explain that 1,000 exabytes, which I just mentioned, means digital information equivalent to the content of 50 million libraries of Congress. You know, think about that. I mean, the entire array of human knowledge, you know, is just a fragment of that. Now, in more local terms here, bring it home to you, in 3 years' time, 20 typical households here in Houston will generate more traffic than the entire Internet did back in 1995. 20 households. Okay, that's how rapidly this is growing. Now, before I get too far out in the future, let's consider the forces that are stirring that exaflood right now. It's not just the increase in internet volume per se, but it's the increase in new bandwidth-hungry applications, starting with video. Online video was almost unheard of as recently as 2000. Today, web videos account for 1/3 of all internet traffic, and it's growing rapidly. 8 hours worth of video is uploaded onto YouTube's site every minute. In fact, YouTube, which didn't exist 2.5 years ago, think about that. It didn't exist 2.5 years ago. It today consumes more bandwidth by itself than the entire internet did in 2000. Now, this mega jump in bandwidth demand on the near horizon will also come from high-def video. Now, it's estimated currently, and it's coming, by the way, it's estimated currently that if all the YouTube videos currently being downloaded, and by the way, about 150 million YouTube videos are downloaded daily, okay? If all of that YouTube video being downloaded was high def, if they convert it to high def, it would absorb the entire capacity currently of the internet. Okay, that's because transmitting a high-def video through the internet requires 7 to 10 times the bandwidth it takes the normal video. Now, you all know, you know the popularity of high-def. It's just not comparable to normal TV once you get hooked on it. All the video on the internet is moving in this direction. So again, you've got, it's not just the growth of the traffic, it's the volume, but also it's the bandwidth intensity of these applications. And we're expected, by the way, to invest these billions to keep up with this. So this is a daunting problem for us. Overall, industry experts expect that video traffic will account for at least 80% of all internet traffic by 2010, just 2 years hence. And the transition to an internet so thoroughly dominated by video will be a sea change in terms of the bandwidth requirements and user expectations. Remember, we provide connections to customers. They've got to like our service. We have to be sensitive to their expectations, and their expectations are growing, dramatically every year. Now, online video is front and center with the public right now, as I mentioned, because people are fascinated with it. You're seeing new applications daily. Instead of watching episodes of Lost when they're scheduled on TV right now, you can go online and you can stream them. Okay, all of the networks are catching up with this. People are watching TV shows on the internet, on their computers, catching up with old episodes. If you're as old as me, you're thrilled that you can now watch Captain James T. Kirk, online. Look at all those old episodes. They're on there free now, which is an amazing development. But it creates this ravenous appetite for bandwidth. Now, another thing that's doing that is peer-to-peer file sharing. And peer-to-peer file sharing, which had been confined to downloading music primarily, is now moving into commercial movies. Increasing numbers of people are downloading movies, and you have to think about in terms of how people use the internet. When you just go to a website, you got a quick burst up, quick burst back, and then most of the time you're spending there, you're reading. Okay, so you're not really taxing the bandwidth of the internet. But when you're pulling down video and streaming a movie for 2 or 3 hours, it's constant. It's not a burst. It's constant. And so we need to remember that as we're thinking about the usage of these applications on the internet. We're also looking at a potentially fundamental increase in bandwidth demand in the future, thanks to online computing, which is sometimes called cloud computing. And I know you all are hearing announcements from companies like Google and others that rather than just buy software applications at Best Buy or something like that and loading them on your computer, you just go on the internet and pull down a document creation software like Word and just use it as you need it through this cloud. We think companies are going to be subscribing to online computing services rather than investing in computer capacity of their own. This may be a frightening thing for IT officers in the audience, but I'll bet you that you all will be tasked in the future by management to come up with new ways of delivering services and not necessarily all offering them in-house, but instead outsourcing a lot of this or drawing it off the internet. And it's all going to create additional volumes, additional stresses on these networks. So to keep pace with this surge in volume, it's estimated we're going to need an additional $55 billion in network infrastructure investment just in America. That's all private sector dollars, by the way, $55 billion beyond the numbers I mentioned earlier. And that's just over the next 3 years, 137 billion worldwide. Now what happens if this investment isn't made? Respected estimates say we'll be butting up against the physical capacity of the internet by 2010. That doesn't mean the net's going to crash like an overloaded home computer does, but it does mean we could be facing the internet equivalent of a brownout, with access speeds dropping from super fast to barely moving as the system gets stressed. Now, personally, I don't see that happening. We've got a lot of smart people on that. They're planning for these eventualities. This third wave of online content is not a tsunami in the making that's gonna carry us all away. It is more like a rising tide, and it can lift all boats. It's a tide that drives network investment. We're investing to keep up with that. This is a good thing, okay, because it's driving more fiber optic deployment. It's driving innovation. But it also is driving us toward what a lot of us in public policy circles are terming this holy grail of universal broadband. I've seen estimates that universal broadband, getting it to every person in this country and every person around the world, would stimulate $500 billion in economic growth and create 1.2 million high-wage jobs. The United Nations considers broadband internet access as important to success in the 21st century as access to water or electricity. I don't doubt any of that, but what gets my pulse racing are the incredible applications that universal broadband could deliver if we give them a chance, from life-enhancing entertainment options to life-saving healthcare options. Telemedicine is a really good example of this. Broadband internet connections, if you think about it, they mean that patients in rural health clinics can be examined and evaluated by specialists in teaching hospitals hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away. They can be deployed in smaller hospitals to have their intensive care unit patients monitored and supervised by intensive care specialists who are physically located at other institutions anywhere in the globe. I'm not talking just about information superhighway dreamware. These applications already exist. I mean, they're actually being used in some instances. The technology's in place today. Universal broadband connections are what are needed, and it'll mean these applications can be offered routinely across America. Now, on the fun side, AT&T's IPTV connections offer a look into the future of broadband entertainment. As I mentioned, we're using Internet Protocol technology to create applications where a football fan could watch one game, check out the stats over an Internet connection and on the same screen, maybe monitor live coverage of another game at the same time, or access any content stored anywhere on the Internet from their television while they're watching that game. You could pull out your cell phone and connect up and check what your kids are watching on TV at home. You can program your DVR. Actually, we have services today. You can program your DVR from your cell phone through our IPTV services. So all of these developments, I think, are real. These are not pie-in-the-sky futuristic predictions here. These are things that exist today, but they're incredibly dependent on the investment in these networks, in this broadband infrastructure, which enables all of that creativity and innovation. So I am bullish on the broadband future. I'm confident America can make the exaflood an opportunity rather than a liability. But I'm not naive about the challenges involved. And I'd like to wind things up by reviewing some of those challenges from the perspective of a network operator and from a public policy perspective, at least as I see it. I've already spoken about the growth of internet traffic, which is doubling every 2 years, and about the network investment needed to keep pace with that. But extra capacity alone isn't going to solve the problem. We can't just build our way out of this problem with capacity. We also have to keep building more intelligence into these networks as we expand them. Bigger and bigger pipes just doesn't do it. You just can't keep up. That's why most of the debate on internet public policy revolves around the concept of network management. For those of you who aren't from the telecom world, let me assure you it's more exciting than it sounds. Network management is about freedom. It's the freedom of network operators to use the intelligence built into their own networks. Remember, we're building those networks and we're building the intelligence into them. Okay, so naturally, if you're investing the $19 billion a year we're doing, to keep up with this flow and keep our customers happy, you want to be able to use all the technology that you yourself have invested in. That's part of that's the freedom to innovate, and you use that intelligence to deliver the broadband services at the greatest efficiency and at an appropriate price. Doing that has always required network operators to manage the flow of traffic, balance out the needs of all customers, protect the overall security of the network. That was true back in the days of operator-assisted long-distance phone calls, if any of you remember those. And it's even truer today for the booming internet traffic that we're facing. The details of broadband architecture differ from network to network. Every one of those is different. Every one of them's run different. But every broadband network in the country has an element of sharing built in. You can see some of that sharing in a broad sense because we're all handing traffic off to each other to get at different places. It really is a network of networks. No one network can carry things end to end. It's just not possible. If everybody wants to use the same network, though, at the same moment at top speed, you're going to have a problem, no matter how advanced your network is. Now, it's kind of ironic, but this shared network, the shared internet that we've built here, is sort of a high-tech Star Wars descendant of the ancient party line phones in some respect, where you have to have some ability to manage the usage in a civil way. If you have home broadband service, you are sharing network capacity with your neighbors, whether you get your service from a phone company provider or a cable company. During peak usage periods, online traffic congestion has the potential to slow everyone down. Now, I don't know if you go online at 5 p.m., maybe when you get home, or 6 p.m., go online, check your email, things like that. You ever notice that no matter how fast your connection reportedly is, we sell you, 3 gigabytes or something like that, or 3 megabit service, it can slow down at 5 or 6 p.m. Why is that? Everybody else is doing what you're doing. It's the same thing functionally that happens when you're in a traffic jam and you try and call home and say you're going to be late and you get a call failed, busy. Why? Because we're not building that cell tower for everybody sitting still there all that time calling at once. We're building it for traffic flowing along there. When everybody tries to call at once, you jam the cell, you get a call failed. It's a shared network, okay? So with high bandwidth applications becoming more common, this presents a growing challenge for network engineers. They not only have to balance the traffic load, they have to balance the need for quality service against the need for affordable service. Now, that balancing act is why your connection might be a little slower during peak periods, as I mentioned, but it's not unavailable in most cases. That's the critical point. It's slower, but it's not unavailable. You don't, on a home broadband network, have it come up and say, sorry, you can't get on the internet right now. Why is that? Because we're managing that traffic flow. It's slowing down, okay, but we're managing the traffic flow to make sure you can still connect, okay? The support of the engineers is a critical part of network management. In the absence of that type of support, you wouldn't have that quality of that service. You wouldn't be able to connect in many instances at all. So without the freedom to manage our own networks, as the engineers feel they need to do to keep the traffic flowing, we'd be reduced as a company to providing big, dumb pipes. Big dumb pipes will not take broadband connectivity where it needs to go. They won't provide the level of service customers have now. They certainly won't meet these traffic flow challenges of the near future. Surrendering the right and responsibility to manage our own networks would be a disconnect from reality, at least to us, and I think to most of our customers. But I'm raising this because in Washington, the reality is that some voices are proposing the government impose controls on how networks operate. Since the internet is indeed a network of networks, what they're proposing in essence is to regulate the internet. Because if you regulate how those networks are managed, you are regulating the internet itself. And that's something our government has always shied away from doing. And I think their shyness about it has been one of the secrets of the success of the internet. It would be massively, I think it would massively disincent the investment our nation needs so desperately to remain competitive if the government were to agree to some of these proposals. It'd also be an endorsement of the fantasy that all internet traffic is the same. You know, big dumb pipe, so you can build your way out of it. Just build more capacity. Don't manage traffic flows. Don't put intelligence into the network. Don't innovate. Just build big pipes. Okay, all bits are created equal is what some people are saying. Bits are treated as commodities. And by the way, I didn't just lay that statement out about all bits being created equal in a pejorative sense. It was actually stated by a public official who shall remain nameless. But in a town that continues to stun people for, inarticulate and statements. This may be one of the dumbest statements made in recent years. All internet bits are created equal and should be treated the same. I'd like to address that for just a second because I think it's a source of a lot of the policy nonsense that we're being approached with these days. First, but putting aside the obvious point that a bit is not a person, and there is no Bill of Rights for bits. It's simply not true that all bits are created equal. I mean, especially in the broadband arena. One bit is an email from your mom, another is spam. One bit is porn, another is that doctor consulting in the midst of open heart surgery. Some bits are latency sensitive, like video, so you have to transmit it. If it's splotchy, comes through splotchy, it's just not watchable. Email is not latency sensitive. If it comes a nanosecond too late, you're not going to notice it like you would with video. Some bits are absolutely dangerous, like viruses or hacking attempts or identity theft. So there are monumental differences between categories of internet traffic. Those different categories require different levels of attention and investment from the world's broadband networks. It wouldn't be smart for us to not treat them differently. They're not the same. And if you're managing the network effectively, you have to account for those differences. Now, I mentioned earlier that 2 million email messages travel through the internet every second. That's 170 billion messages a day. Over half of them are spam. Okay? Are networks really supposed to treat digital junk the same way we treat data carrying the vital signs of a heart patient being monitored? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Then there's the continuing epidemic of phishing, online theft of personal information. Does the public really want broadband network operators to stand aside from this? I mean, our surveys show our public expects us, when we provide a connection, to also help protect them online. They expect us to protect their privacy, their personal identifiable information, things of that nature, but they also expect us to help them safely navigate this place that can be kind of daunting and sometimes dangerous. So, and whether it's viruses, identity theft, or things of that nature, or just parental controls. They expect us to play a certain role in helping them ensure a safe and efficient internet experience. So if you think about it in environmental terms, the spam, the illegal content, the viruses being dumped onto the internet are forms of web pollution. In many ways, you wouldn't think much of an environmental policy that guaranteed polluters the right to unlimited illegal dumping in our forests, rivers, or streams. And again, I know it may sound a little over the top, but that scenario is a public sector version of a private sector problem we could be setting ourselves up for on the internet. Maintaining the right and responsibility of network operators to manage their own networks is the way to keep the internet green and healthy. No one in the internet space, no company like mine that invests in these networks has any problem with government oversight, whether it's of our competitive behavior. There are antitrust laws in place that certainly keep one from acting in a way that could be abusive or things of that nature. Nobody has any problem with government monitoring how we do things to prevent any abuses. But I'd say that the tools to abuse have been there technologically for quite some time, and you simply don't see companies acting that way. We're trying to deal with this problem. Okay, we're trying to deal with the traffic flow. We're trying to be responsive to our customers and get them the service they need, and that requires that as much as possible, we do this in a smart way. Because, again, we can't build enough, we can't invest enough simply to keep up through capacity. Now here's what might be the most interesting network management challenge, and it's one that kind of surprises most people. The top 5% of internet users account for an incredible 50% of peak internet traffic volume. That means a tiny fraction of users are gobbling up half the available bandwidth at any given time. And 90%, I repeat, 90% of internet traffic from those people is made up of illegal downloads of copyright protected movies over peer-to-peer file sharing networks. Now I want to emphasize that when it comes to illegal downloading, AT&T has a very clear policy. We're not going to be an internet policeman. We're not going to be an enforcement agent. We provide a connection and a service to our customers. We want no role in telling them how to use it, what they should or shouldn't do on the internet. But when it comes to managing the network, we can't be indifferent to the unfairness of that big users of bandwidth present in terms of smaller users. Smaller users, in effect, subsidizing the bigger users. So, and most of that is because we offer a connection at a fixed price to everybody, no matter how you use it. But a fixed price, all-you-can-eat buffet as an economic model for the internet won't work if one set of users is paying more to subsidize a small group of power users. A system like that doesn't come close to treating everybody equally. It's a de facto discrimination against the light eaters at that buffet table. Now, that's as close as I care to come to offering a sermon this morning. I'm certainly not going further down the road of offering hard and fast prescriptions for what we need on the internet. But I will close by setting a few priorities that I see. I think, based a bit on common sense in the very productive relationship government and the internet have enjoyed for the last 15 years. Congress and the states recognize the internet for the unique and fast-changing technology that it is. They've taken the very difficult step for them as government officials of stepping aside and have given this promising adolescent room to grow. Now, when it comes to the internet, American policymakers have avoided the syndrome that was described by Ronald Reagan when he said about government that if it moves, we tax it, if it's successful, we regulate it, and if it fails, we subsidize it. So far, whether through luck or skill, when it comes to the internet, Washington policymakers so far have done pretty well. We need to understand that and not let small issues, small hiccups along the way, cause us to radically change course in that treatment. Instead, public policy needs to stay focused on the goal of encouraging universal broadband deployment, encouraging market-driven investment in broadband infrastructure to keep us in front of this exaflood. These things are vital for our kids, they're vital for American competitiveness, and they're vital for our future in a globalized economy. And at the risk of repeating myself, that infrastructure investment needs the reinforcement of public policy that will never strip away the ability of broadband network operators to manage their networks and generate a decent return on their investment. You've heard the investment numbers. Companies are not going to invest in maintaining and growing that network if they don't feel that there's a way to make a return on that investment. So we need to encourage growth of a robust free market, a competitive market that will continue the progress underway and closing the lingering gap in broadband penetration, getting it into underserved neighborhoods and rural communities. There will be times when the free market alone can't deliver the social or economic goals we want. And that's when public policy should encourage public-private partnerships to expand broadband. Successful partnerships are going on right now between governments and the private sector. The state of Kentucky has really been a pioneer in this area through their Connect Kentucky program, and I actually just joined the board of a private sector group called Connect America, which is seeking to take that model countrywide. So there are good models out there for getting broadband into these hard-to-serve areas. I think it's fair to say the government has done well by the internet, not by its absence, but through the light touch it's very intentionally taken with the internet. And I think most Americans are pleased with those results. They've seen broadband access go up as broadband prices have gone down. But to me, the single most exciting thing about broadband connectivity is we're barely past the starting gate. Not long ago, I read an article that said if the internet were the movie industry, we'd still be in the age of silent films. And I think it's something to think about when you think about the potential of this technology. It's not a reflection on our lack of progress to say that. It was an expression of our incredible potential. Nobody doubts that. not after what we've seen over the last 15 years. This is a bull market for innovation, and public policy has been a judicious investor in that environment so far. It's been supportive but not interfering, and I welcome a continuation of that kind of investment by the government in the internet. So thank you very much. Let me stop there, and I guess if we have time, we'll take a few questions. Sure.
If you have questions, just raise your hand.
Sir.
So you managed to talk about, for about 20 minutes about network management without saying the dirty word net neutrality and pretending that this is some Washington nonsense. But the reality is that some very serious people, such as Vint Cerf, who is the father of the internet, and Tim Berners-Lee, who is the father of the World Wide Web, who have very cogent argument why we shouldn't delegate it to corporation to manage the content that we're allowed to see.
Right.
So there are two sides to the issue, and
Sure.
you got your piece, but I just thought that it's not just Washington nonsense.
Well, let me speak to that if I could, sir, because you know it's a very good question, and you know, and I didn't use the term net neutrality in part for a reason, because it means very different things to different people. You know, the FCC has put out what it calls its broadband principles, which is its version of net neutrality. We've endorsed those. In fact, we endorsed a version of those a year before the FCC actually came out with those, and they're very simple principles, but very important. And I think most people would concede that they're net neutrality principles. One of them is that we won't block any legal website, and we don't. Okay, if we get a court order, we do, but we don't block any legal website. That's one of the broadband principles. You know, we don't interfere or tell our customers what applications they can load on their computers or what devices they can connect or things of that nature. Yeah, so there's some basic rules of the road on the internet, and so I think in those terms, you know, we're very supportive of that form of net neutrality, but you know, where I think we come off the rails a bit is where some companies, and Google is among them. Vint Cerf works for Google, and now he does anyway. And they have proposed legislation in the Congress that would do exactly what I described, which would prevent us from managing our networks. It would have the government intercede and put regulations on how networks are managed, and they would say you can't offer new services on these connections. Okay, they would restrict our ability to offer our customers new services, and they would tell us that we cannot manage those bits in an efficient way for our customers. Okay, now if somebody's worried that we're going to act in an anti-competitive way, there are antitrust laws that have been on the books for 100 years. The government can sue us. Any company that feels it's disadvantaged can sue us, and people file actions all the time. So those laws work. And my concern about that legislation is it would, for the first time, put the government in the business of telling network managers how to operate. And I would tell you this: when Vint Cerf worked for MCI, I've got a ream of quotes from him talking about how critical it is to keep the government out of the business of managing networks. So when he actually worked for a network operator and had to manage a network, he felt very differently about that stuff. Let me just stop there. But I would concede that there's a very legitimate debate on these points, which is one of the reasons I raised this. We're not insensitive to how people feel about this. We're probably closer to how our users and our customers feel, though, I would argue, than anybody, because you know, they've got competitive choices, and if they don't like how we do business or how we treat them in terms of their use of the internet, they'll go somewhere else. And so we're very sensitive to that. We know what they want us to do, and we know what they don't want us to do, and we're pretty careful about not crossing those lines. So I think it's a very valid point, and we're trying to be sensitive to it. But I think there are extremes in any debate, and I think there are voices out there that are trying to drive this into a government role to solve a problem that doesn't exist. These are all hypothesized abuses that no one is engaging in. You know, I mean, the things that Cerf has talked about, we could do today if we were going to do it. I mean, there's no regulation or law to prevent us from doing some of these things, and we're not doing them. Why? Because our customers would hate it. I mean, the notion that we would somehow restrict their usage of the internet, you know, gee, if we got a great deal for you, you know, you can go to the websites we pick out for you. I mean, you know, who's going to go for that? I mean, of course nobody's going to do that, and nobody does. So I'd argue that the free market is probably a better regulator in this instance. And if there is an abuse, if somebody is doing something wrong, and if the antitrust laws aren't sufficient to deal with it, then the government has every right to legislate. But prophylactic legislation, you know, is never really a good idea, at least in my view.
Would you care to comment on the way China's trying to manage the use of the internet and what we should do about it? Anything?
Well, that's boy, that's an issue on which we as an Olympic sponsor. Actually, I mentioned Google just a minute ago. It's a problem all of us face, whether it's an AT&T or a Google, and that is, all governments don't take the view of the internet and internet websites and freedom of speech that we take. And I think the challenge for us as a network provider is a little different than for a website provider, but it often comes down to the fact that if you're going to operate in a foreign country, you have to comply with the laws of that country. And we've had instances in countries not China where they want us to take down a website. And if it's consistent with that country's law, whether it would be legal to do so in this country or not, we will do so, at least as far as that country is concerned. Because to operate, we have to. I mean, we're all creatures of laws, and all countries don't write laws like we do, and they don't all have First Amendment rights. And so it's a real challenge. It's a real problem. I know Google tries to deal with it. Yahoo tries to deal with it. Yahoo had the very, awful situation in China where, they were forced to provide information on a particular user who ended up getting arrested by the Chinese government and thrown in jail. And they, in hindsight, they say they would have handled it differently. But these are very difficult questions as in a globalized economy. When you deal with, I'd prefer to say pre-democratic states. So, ma'am.
How far down the road do you think we'll be before we're seeing a full-blown teleportation of individuals communicating with one another?
Teleportation?
Where you are literally in each other's conference rooms, one's in China and one's in the United States.
Actually, that type of technology exists today. It's just been rolled out by Cisco. We're actually working with them on it. It's called telepresence. I assume you weren't meaning teleportation in a Star Trek sense, because that probably is a little farther away. But telepresence is an incredible technology. We actually saw it at a trade show. I went to see it with my boss and at Cisco's exhibit. It blew us away, and he came back. We're deploying it all through AT&T, and they're marketing it to major corporations now. What it is really is it's a conference room setup, but using HD connections, and you have a series of 3 or 4 large screens on one side of the table, and you sit around the other side of the table. People connect in. I've done it. And you lose yourself in it. You're literally sitting across the table from these people. The connection is so good. I mean, you know how difficult it is to do conference calls or even video calls with people, and it's splotchy, and you lose yourself in this. After about a minute or two, you feel you're in the same room with people, and it's quite extraordinary technology. Think about this in terms of of the impact on airline travel, and you talk about climate change and carbon usage, things of this nature. I mean, this is a type of technology that is just incredible, and I think it'll end up mainstream. Now here's the rub, okay? It requires bit management. It requires traffic management to ensure that connection, during that conference. We have to shape that traffic and manage it, and it's the very type of thing that the Sarbanes-Oxley, or not Sarbanes-Oxley, the Snow-Dorgan legislation in the Congress would prevent. I mean, and Cisco would tell you this. If that law passed, which is commonly referred to as the net neutrality legislation, Cisco would tell you we have no business. We can't do it. And so we need to find a common sense way of dealing with these things. I'm not dismissive of the concerns about potential for abuse, and I served 6 years in the government. I understand that sometimes companies do abuse their competitive positions, and we ought to be watched, and if we did that, Congress ought to act. But overall, I'd say let's not try to predict problems before they happen and legislate away the ability to innovate. So,
Sir.
With the recent acquisition or award of the 700 megahertz frequency from the FCC, what do you anticipate the roadmap to look like in the next 12 to 24 months, and how do you think it will enhance or affect the broadband network, the land-based network that you currently have?
Well, this is going to be my easiest question because we're still in a quiet period imposed by the FCC on this, and while they were able to lay out the auction results and we were able to confirm them, I can't until April 6th. I'm not allowed to comment any further on our plans. But I can make a general comment about that spectrum. I think just for those of you who 700 megahertz is kind of an alien term here. It is the current TV spectrum that you use. Okay, next year, the government has mandated that the current spectrum used for analog TV in the United States is going to go away. All TV is going to become digital. Okay, and which is going to be a bit of angst because if you've got a really old analog TV, you're not connected to cable, it ain't going to work anymore. And so there's an education process going on, but in early '09, that spectrum is vacated. Now it is prime real estate. It's really good spectrum. It goes through buildings. It goes around corners. It goes through mountains. It's really good spectrum, and so it propagates very, very effectively. So there's incredible potential with that, and so for those of you who are reading about the auction, watching the auction, and looking at the FCC press release about how much money everybody bid on this, that's why. So let me stop there before I get in trouble. Who else? Anybody else? Okay, well listen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed my time here. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
We're going to move on to our first panel. We have Cameron Kahn leading it, and it's with Rick Miller, Rick Diaz, and Lloyd Boyd. Rick Miller is not in the house. So, oh, there he is. He just came in. So let's get that started, and I'll turn it over to Cameron Kahn.
Thank you.
Do you want a chair?
Yeah, maybe. I can just pull. Good morning. Those who've had kids and you've traveled with them in a car long distance to see a family or member, or just going on vacation, maybe there's a movie also. Are we there yet? And that used to happen with us till we got a broadband card in our laptop, and once when we were traveling, our kids started using it. They actually, the destination we were going to was one of their cousins, and next thing you know is they were actually playing games while we are 800 miles away on the highway, using the broadband card in the laptop. Very interesting. This weekend we had some friends over from New York, and I was sitting and I got on my cell phone a message, and I looked it up, and it was actually a picture of all the wives who had gone out to have a good time shopping, and they were sending a picture to show all of their husbands, look what a great time we're having. So, you know, that's what's happening around the country, bits, bytes, and everything is moving, like James said, and certainly it's exploding tremendously. I want to take this opportunity to thank the panelists for taking the time of their busy schedule to share their expertise. In many ways, as CIOs, we each day we breathe and smell and this convergence and connectivity in our organizations. And the change is very diverse. It's rapid, and there are demands from all our savvy users, clients, and customers. So let me take a few minutes because I think it's important to introduce the panelist. Rick Miller is the Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the University of Texas Health Science Center here in Houston. Rick Miller is a vice president who is responsible for supporting the technology initiatives for mission-critical clinical education, research, and administrative functions of the university at Health Science Center. He joined the university in '87 as assistant vice president. He currently is responsible for overseeing and coordination of all administrative, academic, and clinical technologies, including networking, desktop support, security, disaster recovery, application training support, and records management. He's directs information technology for the university's 6 schools and has a dual reporting relationship to the deans. He was named Chief Information Officer in 2005 after serving as the interim Chief Information Officer for a year. He's had 32 years of professional work experience, including positions at General Homes Corporation, KPMG International, Schlumberger Well Services, and he has a bachelor's in computer science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our next panel, next to Rick, is Rick D, or Diaz. And Richard has served as a Vice President and Information Officer for El Paso since 2006. In his role, he's responsible for implementing and managing the organization's enterprise-wide information technology strategy systems to achieve El Paso's business goals and strategy. Prior to El Paso, he was the Vice President at Burlington Resources from 2002 to 2006, where he was when it was acquired by ConocoPhillips, and he served as CIO for Texaco from '97 to 2002 when it was acquired by Chevron. Rick has been an active participant in industry and information technology organization, including the CIO Executive Summit and the Information Management Forum. He's also an active member for Sheltering Arms Senior Services, a nonprofit United Way agency dedicated to preserving the dignity and independence of Houston's elderly. Rick graduated from Central College of Kentucky with a bachelor's in math from the University of Texas at Austin and a doctorate degree in mathematical logic. Next to Rick Diaz is Lloyd Boyd, and he's the Chief Information Officer here in Houston at the Siva Freight Management Corporation. He has global accountability for the integration, management, and improvement of a complex structure to support operations for 12,000 employees across 45 countries. So here we're talking about very global and highly reliant and efficient information management to help attract and retain customers, efficiency and effectively manage operations, and provide management support capabilities throughout the process flow. Siva Freight is a $3 billion non-asset-oriented hybrid freight forwarding division of CEVA, an $8 billion integrated supply chain company. Boyd has more than 20 years of information technology experience spanning in terms of development, project management, data center consolidation, strategic planning. And prior to CEVA, he held a variety of CIO leadership roles with Koch Industries and various information technology roles with Nissan North America. He started his career in account management for Westford Financial Services. He has extensive global experience managing teams across most continents. In his leadership, Lloyd has developed a reputation for focusing information technology on business-oriented value delivery using risk management and economic analysis to help with the alignment and prioritization of business needs. So, as you can see, a lot of experience here, different industries. And so to get started, what I want to do is ask the panelists if they want to briefly just talk about anything which I've missed out in terms of their industry or competition or characteristics they may want to share.
Okay, the University of Texas Health Science Center is one of 6 healthcare components of the University of Texas. The Health Science Center here in Houston is about 36 years old. I've been there 20 of those 36 years and approximately half of my career. We are a graduate level institution. We are not a hospital. We're affiliated with several hospitals, and our primary teaching hospitals are Memorial Hermann in the Texas Medical Center and LBJ, which is a Harris County Hospital District hospital. In our educational, we have 6 schools, as I said. We have a School of Medicine, we have a School of Public Health, we have a School of Nursing, which is in the top 10 ranked nationally. We have a dental branch. Our dental branch is over 100 years old, so despite the fact that the Health Science Center has only been in existence for 36 years, several of our schools have been around many, many more years than that. We have a Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences, and we have a School of Health Information Sciences, which is kind of a marriage between the healthcare industry and information technology. It's kind of an interesting school. It's also about 5 years old. It grew out of what our School of Allied Health was. We operate the Harris County Psychiatric Center in conjunction with the state of Texas and the Harris County Hospital District. And we educate students primarily, but we also treat patients. We have practice plans in our medical school and in our School of Nursing and in our dental school. So we have clinics located throughout the city, and we have clinics across the state of Texas as well. We conduct research. We like to think of ourselves as one of the up-and-coming research campuses of the University of Texas. We were one of the first to get a Clinical and Translational Science Award from the NIH. There were 12 awarded 2 years ago, and we were among the first 12. Pretty unique. We were the only one in the University of Texas system. We were extremely proud of that. Now we are joined by University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas. So the other healthcare components of the University of Texas are still waiting. We are really proud to be the first. It's been a real challenge because the information technology in that is exceptional. The budget of the Health Science Center is a little over $750 million. We have 4,500 faculty and staff and about 3,200 students. Approximately 23% of that $750 million actually comes from the state of Texas. The rest of it is generated through research grants and through seeing patients. So even though we are a state of Texas institution, most of our funding comes from outside. We're located in the Texas Medical Center. As I said, we have clinics all over the city of Houston, and we have satellite campuses, primarily for the School of Public Health, located in about half of the University of Texas branches. There are 16 of those across the state of Texas. That's it.
No, thanks. Hi again, I'm Rick Diaz, and El Paso Corporation is headquartered here in Houston, in downtown Houston. We employ about 5,500 employees, mostly in the United States, although we do have operations in Mexico, Brazil, and Egypt. The mission of El Paso Corporation is to provide natural gas and related energy products and a safe, efficient and dependable manner. We're basically organized around two key businesses: an interstate natural gas pipeline system and a natural gas exploration and production company. Our pipeline system is the largest in North America. It's approximately 43,000 miles of interstate pipeline, and on that system we transport about 1/4 of the natural gas consumed in the United States every day. We also operate approximately 230 billion cubic feet of storage capacity for natural gas to meet peak demands, and one of the handful of liquid natural gas receiving terminals on Elba Island in Georgia. The Exploration and Production Company is one of the 10 largest independent exploration production companies in the U.S., operating primarily in North America, the Gulf of Mexico, Brazil, and Egypt, with about 2.9 trillion cubic feet of equivalent of proved reserves. So that, in a nutshell, is El Paso Corporation.
Good morning. Lloyd Boyd. I'm the non-Rick of the panel this morning, so that's the way you can remember my name. First of all, I'm very, very proud and very honored to be here, and anything that we can do to help with understanding the challenges we face that may be of interest, please ask questions. Otherwise, you're going to get discussions that will be very boring to you. A little bit about SEVA. It is a merger of two companies that occurred effectively August of last year. One used to be called Eagle Global Logistics, which was founded by a gentleman here in Houston, Jim Crane, entrepreneur, a very, very interesting man to work with. And a company was combined with a logistics company called TNT Logistics. The combination of those two companies creates the fourth largest supply chain provider in the world, behind DHL, Panalpina, Kuehne+Nagel. So we're a very large organization in the industry space that we serve. What we really do is we help companies manage supply chain activity. And we are about, the combination of the two companies is about 52,000 employees in over 100 countries. We do about, on the freight management side, which is really the movement of large freight around the world, is about 6.5 million transactions a month. That's the physical movement of activity that we manage every month, and then you can translate that into electronic transactions, email messages, instant messages to communication. Our sort of our commercial tagline is we make business flow, but in fact what we do is we make business information flow. What companies do is they outsource their supply chain activity to us. We have to take information from them, their forecasts and plans of activities, both manufacturing and retail, manage the movement and the management of inventory for them, provide information back to them on a constant and consistent basis all the way through the conclusion of that transaction. So the conference that we're talking about has a lot of interest to us. I would say that it's interesting because what we just heard in the keynote speaker's comments really ring very true, and I had a lot of questions I want to ask of him that it's almost a whole separate conference around competitive advantage for the United States if we develop the right policies and really enable the growth of this communication and what it can bring, because within the commercial world we see an awful lot of demand that changes. So that's a little bit about the company that we operate, the interest that we have in the communications and the convergence of technologies, expectations coming from our customers, and quite literally expectations coming from the employees that are my customers every day. The things that are available to them at their home, they're expecting to have available to them at work.
So how has the information infrastructure, now talking about the region here, has changed in the business of our organizations in the past 5 to 10 years? Just to take, I've been here at Rice for, this is my 5th year. We're certainly, from a Rice perspective, we're doing more reliance on data and electronic resources than ever before. We're definitely passing a lot more bits, bytes, megabytes, and we have a lot more global connections, and so it doesn't matter where the data resides. It's faster, up to date, 24/7, 365 is just the world we live in. It's more reliable than it used to be. Certainly the extension of the web and the integration, of course, the whole sharing and collaboration piece plays into this, community building and those connections which are taking place, soaring productivity in many ways in this arena. And then choices, the pervasive choices, and anytime, anywhere is what our customers, our clients, our faculty, our students are looking for. And the business of the university, as it changes, also that impacts our organizations. And so from a Rice point of view, what we've seen is the upgrade of our Internet to connectivity, our commodity connectivity. Those pipes that James was talking about are much bigger, fatter, and we continue to upgrade those. We're also in the process of building regional dark fiber networks within Houston. So there's the collaboration piece which is going on with the medical center as well as other institutions here in this area. So can you talk about some of your experiences since you've joined or been with your organizations?
I'll start with that. You back up just a minute. I started getting my degree in computer science in 1969, and I've been in the information technology field in the center of it since then. So we're going on 40 years. Also, I've been at the Health Science Center for 20, and pretty much in the same leadership role in information technology. We did roll some other departments into mine. So I have a perspective on what has been happening to an organization of those 20 years, and then I have the information technology perspective. What concerns me the most, and it really has changed very much in the last 10 years, I think that's a really good time frame to take a look at, but what has exploded on our campus, and remember we're in the clinical care business, we're in the research business, and we're in the education business. We have a broad spectrum of customers, from patients to students who are in their teens and 20s who have an entirely different perspective of what information technology is, to researchers, and a lot of research is conducted on the internet. In fact, that's largely why it was developed. The expectation around the connectivity is so high that delivering it is an impossibility. There is an expectation that it is 100% integrated, so that if a researcher on my campus wants to log on to a server at Rice, it's no problem. Well, Cameron and I can tell you that is a problem. There are a whole bunch of reasons why that's going to take us a few days or a few weeks to work out. They also expect it to be seamless. Using that same example, I'm a researcher at the Health Science Center. I want to use my user ID and my logon. I don't want to have to get another one from Rice, or one from MD Anderson, or one from Herman Hospital, or whatever. I just want to be able to log on. Why can't you do that? Another one, a myth, is that it's free. We just did our budget for fiscal year '09, starting in September, and the amount of money that we're paying to internet providers, just ISP connectivity, and some of it comes to the University of Texas at Austin, was somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000. That doesn't include the equipment. Those are the fees. So it's not free, and you can't get everywhere with it, which is the ubiquity. It's everywhere. Why can't you do it as a CIO? Yes, I want to log on to a server that may be located in Russia. Most recently, this was a really interesting one, we had a whole project designed around researchers in the Valley in Texas, who had built their entire project around wireless laptops. We're just going to use our wireless laptops here and send data back to Houston. Don't think so. There is no wireless down there. It's not ubiquitous. You can't use it. So a whole project was built around this, and it was funded, interestingly, by the legislature. So we found a way around that, but there was a radical change there because the reality set in that that's not the way it works. Another one is that anything can be done instantaneously. Why can't I set up that video conference with UT Brownsville. And yes, I just walked in here and I gave you 10 minutes. What's the problem? Well, they use entirely different equipment in that particular region, and it just goes on nationally. It's not just among UT components. Actually, we're fairly consistent. But that one was an oddball. It doesn't take 10 minutes. It takes a lot longer than that, and those connections have to be done. They have to be built. We can generally get them done. We're getting better at this, so we can get them done within an hour. But it does take some time and some negotiation to make these things happen. And then another myth is that this is always available. It's always on, it's always working. That's not true either. We do have to take our networks down and do maintenance on them. It does interrupt what's going on in a variety of settings, including clinical settings. We found out, unfortunately, one day that a video conference was going on with Russia, and we took the network down for maintenance. But it was 2 a.m. in the morning. But you learn about these things. But these networks are not always available, and you have to take that into consideration when you build these processes that expect that all of these myths be fulfilled. You have to expect this isn't really going to happen this way, and you have to build that into the expectation so that you can continue your business even though the network's not available and it's not free and all these other things.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, you know, when I think about energy companies and how the business has changed based on really things related to the internet and the World Wide Web, it's really been pretty amazing. I mean, a lot of the things we think of as mundane now, the as Rick mentioned, the always on, right? The always available. I'm always connected. I have access to data, to voice. To access to my company's infrastructure at all times. And you're right, we, within companies, we take that for granted now. Lloyd mentioned people wanting to have everything at work that they have at home, but they also want to have everything at home that they have at work. So when they're home, they want access to what may be very sophisticated applications with rich medium, particularly in the energy industry. Say it's someone related to reservoir engineering or exploration for natural gas. And we've really become dependent on the local infrastructure and infrastructure really in all the areas where we operate to extend our reach as a company into not just people's homes but wherever they are in a manner where they have enough broadband that they can do what they need to do as an employee. And I guess the other thing I would think of is just the tremendous innovation that this has driven over the years as people have thought of different ways and better ways to offer new services to companies and to leverage the access to the internet that we all have to do innovative things. I mean, we think of you know, the Googles and the Amazons and et cetera. But in the you know, in the business space, there's lots of little ways in which these innovations happen that we leverage. I thought the example that our keynote speaker was using of the remote medical applications. But you know, companies all have their own applications like that. In the energy business, it might be having your expert on subsurface drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, remotely on live, watching that operation, both all the data coming out of it as well as the video, so that we can make sure that bit gets properly placed and we actually find some natural gas as opposed to, you know, wasting $3 or $5 million on a dry hole. You know, in monitoring, in little things that maybe we take for granted after 10 years, like monitoring offshore platforms, so that they're you know, we don't have environmental incidents, we don't have safety incidents. All of those control systems can be monitored 24/7 remotely on an onshore facility where we have real expertise that we can apply to them. The same for if you think of the kind of the problem you have in the energy sector is really all your business, even though your headquarters in a city like Houston, all your business is tremendously rural. Everywhere you do business, you have the problem of how do you extend your reach in these areas where your pipeline's moving through remote areas of the Colorados, and you want to make sure that you don't have a leak in that pipeline. or you want to be able to make sure your field people can access your network from their handheld so that they can interface with systems. And definitely, I can tell you, 10 years ago when I was first CIO of Texaco, one of the big issues we had wherever we drilled was, how do we get, any kind of connectivity into these areas at all? So, and that's improved over 10 years, and we really look forward to the continued innovation that will drive both in how our employees work and how we can do business as a company.
Ditto. There's really not much more to add to what both Rick and Rick have mentioned. What we've got developed here in the Houston marketplace, really across most of the major metropolitan areas of Texas, very similar to what you see across the rest of the U.S., is pretty sound and very scalable infrastructure, and we become accustomed to that. Our customers don't understand why we have a problem when we're trying to, as I mentioned, making business flow, why we have a problem with delays when information is coming from other regions. As Rick mentioned, you're seeing places that you're operating that are in not as well developed areas, and yet your customers, your business is expecting the same kind of interoperability as they are experiencing within their own marketplaces. The U.S. economy is not necessarily as hot as it has been, but it is still the dominant economy in the world, and 70% of our revenues are generated, even though we're a very global company, are based on drives from this economy. So the expectations are built from the decision makers of the companies that are basically managed from this region, and they have the same expectations that we have, the same expectations my 17-year-old has around technology, and it's really difficult when you're a globally connected organization to provide that expectation. So we've set a standard, and we operate in that standard from this region. One of the concerns from the speaker that I had that I really wanted to ask was, where are we going to take that? Will we continue to have that competitive advantage in that ubiquity and the simple things, power? Network equipment runs off of electrical power. Well, it's great to have the connectivity, but if you still have a power grid issue in the areas where you're operating, you still have an issue. So we've set the expectation both within the state, within the marketplace, within the region, and how do we continue to leverage that is going to be a question for us going forward.
So that's a good into the obstacle piece of this implementation of IT major in our organizations, and so how do we overcome that piece? How do we overcome those obstacles?
Well, since I was in the midst of talking, I'll finish that off. I think our keynote speaker, I think he really mentioned some of the critical issues that we're going to be facing. The flood of expectations, the growth, the demand. This is a common structure of communications. So how will that evolve? What are going to be the next major developments in technology that are going to really help that explode? Are we going to try to just build larger current technologies that we have, capacities within that? Will there be a whole new, better set of technologies? Will codecs, the compression, decompression algorithms, will they get to be much more sophisticated to allow us to use capacities smarter than what we have today? But we are going to run up, we see today where we get squeeze points with our various providers going through various locations where there are problems with capacities. And at sometimes we have to wait for them to buy capacities from other providers, or we have to wait for capacities to get built out. I don't think there's any magic in it. As we were talking about earlier, it's a physical structure, it's a technology structure, and I think there's going to have to be some technology leadership in helping think in the next 5 to 10 years what are going to be the major advances in that, not just the extension of what we have.
In the 2000 bust, remember, it was excessive fiber and dark fiber everywhere. And now it's even hard to even find the dark fiber where it is. Isn't it? That's where we're running into that as well.
Exactly. The dot-com era, the major investments that happened, venture capitalist investments in a lot of various areas, got a lot of fiber implemented. But where you're seeing that fiber now tends to be in some of the B and C markets. Everything in the A-level markets has been saturated, and a lot of it's because of things like YouTube. The utilization and expectations of convergence of various technologies is consuming a lot of that capacity. Those are the same technologies that business transactions flow across.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess what I would add to that I'm not sure James touched on in his speech earlier was really the access speed part of it. I think that speed is important in terms of access speed, and he talked about building bigger pipes. But as we have more robust applications on the internet, whether those are business applications or your home applications and home entertainment, which we're all interested in, I think our expectations advance over time, and I think now we're at a point where when we talk about 2 or 3 megabit access isn't particularly fast or robust. There are countries where you can get 20 and 30 and more megabit access on a routine basis, and I think as part of the public policy, I would think and I would hope that as we form policy to push out broadband, that we give some thought to the fact that it's not just having connectivity, particularly in lower income areas perhaps, to kind of breach the digital divide, but they have to have the appropriate level of access to really do the kinds of things that are meaningful and will become meaningful on the internet.
Around UT System, I'm known as $1 Million Rick. So the budget office, in case they're watching this, would be disappointed if I didn't say that I could do just damn near anything with money and time and more people. So
everybody knows we're all in complete agreement.
And remember, I said one of the myths was that a lot of this stuff is free, and that myth is alive and well at our institution. So the internet's out there, Rick. Why don't you just take advantage of it? Just plug a wire into the wall and we're up, right? That's really not the way it works. And in our organization, as we have exploded over the last 10 years and built an incredible network across the TMC, and it's done in collaboration with the other institutions, I think what has been missing out of this is any discussion about what it costs, A, to maintain this stuff, and even worse, to replace it, because the lifetimes of this equipment is 3 to 5 years, and we have several of the key devices on our campus that are running at 9. But what's the problem with just upgrading all of this stuff to 100 gigabit? Well, I'd have to replace about $300,000 worth of equipment, and then we'll start talking. We have an incredible infrastructure out there that is in need of updating, and it's in need of updating constantly. The nation talks about the infrastructure of roads and bridges and things like that. The information technology infrastructure that is on a much shorter replacement cycle, and for all I know, maybe more expensive, but it's certainly as critical, is in need of updating, and keeping up with that is going to be a tremendous problem for universities since we're partially public funded. Of course, we can just raise the tuition rate or tax you more. Not that that hasn't ever occurred to us. But still, we do have to live within our means. We can't be taxing you forever. At some point, you're going to revolt. So it just boils down to more time, more money, and more people in order to make this work. And so that's my plug to the budget office, in case you're listening.
To build and provide affordable access, that's what we're talking about, to all, access to all, and we just heard about digital divide. What role can we play to collaborate in this, in representing the variety of industries we have here or in Houston to lead the way?
Okay. Dee, would you like to start?
Yeah,
Rick, you have your turn. It's your
my turn to start? Okay. Well, yeah, obviously I think that, that link needs to be made between the economic growth in an area and and having the kind of broadband access affordable to all, and what that can do for economies and innovation. There's I know there's been, as was mentioned earlier, I think, by both Cameron and by James, that there's been studies in this area. There is identification that that kind of investment does drive economic growth. Obviously, the problem is who directly benefits and who indirectly benefits. Obviously, companies like El Paso benefit from, the overall, both the overall investment in telecommunications infrastructure. Of course, we pay for what we directly use, don't get me wrong, but as there's more capabilities across the world, then all companies benefit from that. And of course, we all benefit as businesses and individuals through economic growth in general, whether that happens to be directly El Paso or not. So I think making that connection and really selling that through conferences like this to policymakers is going to be key.
I see one of the things that when I look at this question also, I see that as definitely the partnership between educational institutions and corporations, but also from a fundamental point of view, the basic skill and the fundamental skills we also need, for our skill sets to be able to run these networks and our organizations, and I think that's another area where retention and recruitment, having skilled people in the area where, Rick, you were talking about economic development, exactly plays right into
Oh, it does, and it's huge for companies, and particularly if you're going to drive regional growth, companies are really attracted to areas where they feel like they can recruit talent, and I think these kind of infrastructures really serve as a foundation for all the levels of education in the community and access to knowledge and skills.
Yeah, Rick, as you were mentioning, I was looking down. I have a pen that I use that was given to me by what we call our LDPs, Leadership Development Program folks, people that we take out of post-graduation and put them through a program to help them learn our business. We move them around to various pieces of the business, and really it's been quite successful for us in terms of how we've been able to identify our top talent and help promote their growth. People that have run significant regions of the company have come out of this program. And I think that, just to tag on to what Rick said, is exactly, we have to build a business case. And the business case is around the economic advantage companies can get from that collaborative. If I were to sit down and work, we could probably figure out the benefits that we have gained as a company from our work with universities and the development programs, and how we've helped people create their careers and help our company grow through that. And I think we need a better job of formalizing that kind of a process. So as we look at just on the technology side, what it takes, the skill sets. Some of the things that the private sector can do is help provide information of what's being valued. What are we seeing that's of importance out there to the business growth, the demands that are happening, the kinds of things that we see that we're going to need, our forecast of talent and leadership capabilities. And then some sort of a forum where we can start to tap into that. Whether it's, think of a forum where we're putting out common sets of problems, and university students can log in and help solve some of those problems. And you extend that out to, the announcement about the 10 bubbles for Houston. I don't know where the next solution could potentially come from. Is it somebody within one of those 10 bubbles? How do I know? How do I help them get tapped in? How do we start to find that talent that's out there through the use of this ubiquity, of this communications, the technologies that are available to us, not just to solve just the business problems, but to solve technology problems.
So Houston, I think we all agree, has the assets, and how we go about working collaboratively and to be able to innovate, I think helps also the whole business development and attracts people over here. So what are some of the challenges and opportunities you see in this rapidly changing environment? I think, from my perspective, I see this as a life-enhancing. When you use technology in health, education, economic development, and public safety. Certainly, I also look at it that it's something, hopefully we can excite a lot of the younger people and generation and students to engage and go more into the science, technology, math area, which I think we as the United States needs to stay competitive, and I think in some ways we're lagging behind that other countries.
Yeah, I would slightly alter that and say not stay competitive, but regain leadership. You know, I thinking about the conference today and some of the topics that may come up, I asked my 17-year-old, who is, you know, a typical teenage kid, what were some of the expectations he had of technology, just to see where his mind is at. And it's amazing when you're not encumbered with the issues of budgets and administration and all of those things, the kinds of things that he just rattled off the top of his head, the things that were, I mean, you know, simply said, but really pretty compelling. His view was things like the Garmin and TomTom are going to die and go away. You know, he's got a cell phone that he can get access to the internet with. It has something on there called Telenav. Why would I need to invest in any of those things? He said the issues are our user interface. You guys, meaning the technology guys, expect everybody to key things in because that's what you grew up with. I expect to be able to have some sort of virtual mapping that I can just move that's intuitive. He relates to his grandparents who have a difficult time retrieving voicemail. Why does technology have to be difficult? And he's voicing to me this view of how it could be simpler. And that dreaming, that sort of simplistic view of how that should be, is what we ought to be taking leadership in developing. I can find a lot of business benefits to develop that if I could get access to the talent that understands how to actually create that. In the meantime, I have to go through a budget process and work with the other things. But those are the things that I think we could tap into, and we could really create excitement around the technologies, the engineering, math, and sciences. Make it exciting, make it an interesting place to be.
I'd like to comment a little bit on the rapidly changing environment. You know, remember that everything in our new information technology world is connected, and everybody has a PC on their desk, and you're probably all familiar with the weekly or monthly updates that we get. If you run PeopleSoft or Oracle or any of the major applications, you know that you get a major release every year. All of this equipment and the hardware and the software, all of it is aging at an unprecedented pace and is going to have to be updated or replaced in the 3 to 5 year time frame, and then link all of this stuff together. And there is some component, many, probably hundreds of thousands, that are changing as we speak. And all of this being linked together, our expectation is that it's always up and it's always running. And our economy, in many respects, is dependent upon what we do as we're transmitting information around the internet to various companies, other governments, and so forth. And we have a problem on our hands because all of this depends on people. I've been in the business, as I said, for about 39 years. It's, I could say that back probably 20 years ago, you probably did have a guru on your staff who pretty much understood what was going on information technology-wise. You don't have that anymore, and it's impossible. It's not going to happen. So we have to put tremendous teams of people with highly specialized knowledge together and make them work. And the computer science programs are not turning out a lot of those people. A lot of those people are going into finance. Of course, now they're coming out of finance and going other places like help desks, or maybe Starbucks if they want to improve their career. But you know, putting these teams together is part of what we have to do. There is nobody on my staff anymore who can put all of this together and kind of look where it is and fix what's going on or make it work. So I have to rely on teams of people. I have lots of people. I have talented people, but I've got to put them together in a way to actually get this stuff done. That's what we're dependent on, and this technology, of course, is changing, and so I have to retrain these people every 3 to 5 years as well. It's essential that we have that staff available to us, and so in a marketplace like Houston, where you can tap into that capability, the resources that we have here at the University of Houston and Rice and University of Texas and so forth, is essential to keeping this stuff going. It's a real interesting problem. It is quite different than it was 20 years ago. It's a real challenge to keep it going, and I think that probably contributes to the fact that most CIOs don't keep their jobs more than a few years. So it's a challenge.
I want to open it up for the audience to ask any question of our panelists.
The technological often goes a lot faster than the sociological.
Absolutely.
And so you talked about being able to work offshore from the valley, from the Colorado hills, etc. What policies have your companies put into place to balance the human side against the technological? You know, work could become 24/7 for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, mine's been buzzing away while I've been sitting here. But I think, it's interesting you say that, and I'm not sure it's a policy issue, but it's certainly an issue, a philosophy or a sociological issue that companies have to face up to. We spend a lot of time at El Paso engaging our workers around issues of work-life balance and wellness, and really trying to help them understand and emphasizing for them that because we have these tools doesn't mean that we're setting that expectation that they're on 7 by 24, that we expect them to have a life outside of work, and that for that to be rich and fulfilling. So I think first companies have to set that out as a position with their employees, that they want to encourage that and want to provide, and sometimes the tools also help provide that kind of balance, so that if people have special situations, it's not required now that you show up in the home office every day and work in your office. There's a lot of flexibility just from the standpoint of I can really work from anywhere in the world. My wife, for example, is a vice president for a company that's headquartered in Los Angeles and works out of our home. So that's my other CIO job, is taking care of her. But and that's worked very well because of the connectivity options that we have. Now, could she work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week? She could. I mean, she has that capability, but you have to find that balance, I think, between with yourself and with your employer. So I don't know. From a policy standpoint, I don't think we've understood how we can translate that into policy.
It's a timely question for us as merging two companies together, because you're really taking cultures of two different companies and really trying to define what that new common culture will be like. We haven't established a formal policy around that, although sort of the role of leadership is to start to establish what that culture should be, and we have some informal agreement that kind of as Rick had mentioned, that there has to be that right balance. Work is a major focus of your life, but it's not the focus of your life. And so we're trying to enable that through, just as Rick said, the practicalities of when we're seeing people who have kids who have special events or things that are happening, well then go, participate, be a part of that. And in that sort of informal activity, sort of through the informal agreement of leadership, is establishing what I think will eventually state something that will help guide what the organization should do to help balance that out. Because global company, 24 hours a day, business is going on, customers are asking questions 24 hours a day around the world, and that answer could exist anywhere. But that person could be sleeping, or they could be in the middle of something else that's really much more important to them than that question from a customer. And balancing that out is not well defined yet.
Graduate school is 24 hours a day, clinical care is 24 hours a day, and research is 24 hours a day. What wasn't 24 hours a day was administration. So the administrative arm is having a little bit of problem with all of a sudden I'm on call no matter what group I'm in, but especially in information technology, 24 hours a day. We have run into some legal issues regarding working at home. And so as public policy is shaped, we should try to keep up, because working at home is going to happen, and some of the laws that make that more difficult move the liability into someone's home is a problem.
Yes.
Kind of reflecting on Jim's one chart, sort of the internet map, and how many providers there are, and that was just tip of iceberg. My question is, for each of your organizations and what you're trying to do at the various sites that you manage, is how do you determine provider selection, or do you go after multiple providers, assuming they're all IP, internet protocols, and they can tie into your local network? You go after multiple wide area providers, and so what flexibility are you looking for in terms of easily moving to one if they don't behave properly and we don't have net neutrality protections or whatever? If they're not delivering to your expectations, how easy is it for you to move between providers?
The University of Texas has probably the largest network in the state of Texas. We prefer to buy. It's run out of Austin, and so we have built a tremendous network of fiber that we lease and own. Where we run into problems is when we have to go into places where we can't serve ourselves. That becomes more interesting. And then here in Houston, we have one internet connection that's provided by the University of Texas, but we feel like we need to have more than one because the University of Texas does a great job of keeping that connection up, but it's not always up. And we can't afford to be down as a healthcare provider, so we have at least one other connection off. One is a private provider, and then another one is another consortium of universities. So we try to stay on our own network to the extent possible. That's just kind of a dream that probably the public corporations can't match, but we can.
Yeah, so we've built the Lone Star Educational and Research Network. That's one piece of that. And then Southeast, we have a Southeast Gigapop here, which there's institutions within Southwest in Houston, which are part of that, and they buy together. And then locally, we're building a dark fiber between institutions to do that. But again, policy implications from the north, from Washington, of course, will still impact all of those pieces, how we utilize them. Because bandwidth is in and out, so it has to leave and go somewhere to another ISP provider.
I guess from a private company perspective, I think that we do build our own private backbone network of lease lines, and I think most companies trade off flexibility versus cost in these decisions, so that you want some flexibility between vendors in terms of who you get your lease lines from as well. But the more you put with one vendor, the better deal you're going to get. Now, in terms of access into the public network, so that we can build our virtual private network out into it, I would say I guess it's my opinion that it is easy to change ISPs as a company, and generally we use more than one in case one's having a problem. So that's probably the private network is probably the larger part of our communications expense as opposed to actual connection into the public network.
Yeah, we as the map sort of, I think, helped illustrate, even though it was maybe difficult to see the details of it, the general concepts were able to be conveyed. There is no one single provider of the internet. And operating in over 100 different countries, you cannot find a single provider that will be able to bring all of your connectivity. What we have done, and we completed about 2 years ago, was a global RFP process with all the providers, about 50 different providers worldwide, to say these are the locations we've got to have connectivity to. These are the service level expectations that we have, the types of traffic that we're expecting to have managed, and kind of lay that out and get a response. From that process, we had, prior to the process, we had 10 different providers worldwide. we actually went to a single provider, which I have to admit shocked me. I didn't think we'd get to that conclusion. But that single provider manages the relationships with local providers. The one location where we cannot get that to happen is China. So we have a separate relationship with the Chinese telecom provider, which is the Chinese government. But that's working out okay. We understand limitations, but it has worked out. That agreement expires actually this next year. We keep those because the landscape changes so quickly. We kept it to a fairly short-term contract. And with the merger of the TNT Logistics side, who had a different set of arrangements, this next year we're going to go through another horrendous RFP process, and we'll see how that works out. We tried to generate it based on service levels and understanding of the management that's required in the connectivity that we're expecting.
And I think in our business today, almost everything has to have redundancy. Everything has to have a backup. Everything has to be built for disaster recovery. And so those are all, you're doing 3 times the work now, and you need 3 times the resources to keep everything up, because we've learned even here at Rice that systems have to stay up 24/7. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people just went to lunch, came back the next day. Those days are over. Everything's got to be up, and no matter what, and we rely so much on others doing our work. If it's a team working across the United States or across the world, they all need connectivity, and if 1 or 2 of those points go down, they really aren't going to be that productive. So there's a lot of emphasis on quality of service provided by our ISPs or the providers, and that's very, very critical to us. Well, I want to thank the panelists. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Round of applause for. We have a break.
I had a last question actually for them during time. Sure. Okay, if you think about the network as pipes and nodes, some of the nodes are the human brains, and we think it's a good thing to increase the flow, but the human brain, there's nothing you can do to increase. And what we're seeing, especially in the academic environments, maybe you can see it in business, because business processes are able to handle bigger flow, is the ability, we have information flowing, but we don't have, Gary calls it connectedness, connectivity, because people can't keep up with their email, they can't keep up with information. Are you seeing this?
Absolutely. And I think that's, we need to rebuild the human processes to go with the technology. You can send me, send me 4 more emails. It'll just be 4 more that go unread because I can't deal with them. And I'm not the only person who has that problem. And look at the amount of information that we transmit around electronically, and then it all comes down to somebody who actually has to put something into action, and they can't do it in many times. Sometimes there aren't enough people there. Sometimes there's not enough structure there. They don't know what to do with all of this stuff that just got routed to them. So you're right, the bottleneck is the human being anymore, and we're the ones who actually take that information and turn it into something of value. And it's a real problem.
And it's not just the information overload, and we do worry about that a lot in companies because we tend to not be able to hire more people, so the same people just have to keep handling more stuff. But also, as Lloyd was mentioned earlier, I think it was Lloyd, and I apologize if it was Rick, but the pace of change. So not only are you having to handle all this information overload, but the technology is constantly changing. You're getting new applications, new ways of working. Now suddenly you got text messages coming at you too, and et cetera. So, yeah, that's managing that and training people how to work in their environment and handle the information and process flow is challenging management issue in companies.
There's an interesting book written by Goldblatt called The Theory of Constraints, which talks about as you refine processes, you get to a bottlenecking point that has to be refined and continue to move through. What we typically find is as you refine business processes, you can see things continue to move through, but you get to the next point typically is that human node. And what we typically find out is as we revamp processes, you have to revamp roles and responsibilities around those processes to really map to that. You can't look at everything as being a technology or process. You also have to bring in the human capital part of it, which is what are the roles and responsibility changes that have to be mapped with those process changes, with the evolution of the technology adaptation and adoption for that process. Otherwise, simply putting in higher throughput through the technology and changing the process so that you can actually automate decisioning based on a set of rules just means that Mary now gets 15,000 more transactions to manage that she couldn't handle before. So you really have to have a holistic look at people, process, and technology.
There's another book that I'd like to mention called The Paradox of Choice, and it, it shows that additional choices, perhaps because of more information being available, doesn't necessarily mean that you make a better selection, but it does mean that you're probably going to be more dissatisfied with the selection that you did make. And then the book kind of traces it all the way into depression, in the United States, which may in fact be the case, but what are we going to do with all this information? We don't have time to look at it anymore. The lawyers do, though. There's a nasty little twist on it.
Generate another.
Yes. Well, let's take a few minutes for coffee outside, and we'll reconvene to hear Joel Thierstein at 11:15. And thank you all for your thoughts.